construction of the Arkansas state capitol took more than 15 years to complete due to cost overruns, allegations of bribery, and changes in political leadership. The dome, shown here under construction, is covered with genuine gold leaf. Excavation for the building unearthed human remains buried in mass graves on the grounds of a former prison. The Arkansas State Capitol, Little Rock. When people think of a haunted place, they often conjure up an image of an empty, deteriorating old house. Maybe an abandoned cemetery comes to mind, one that nature is slowly reclaiming, with wild vines engulfing weather-worn, crumbling gravestones whose inscriptions are hardly legible. Sometimes, however, the most public of places can be the most haunted. Have you ever stood on the steps to the walkways that meander up a slight hill to Arkansas's imposing Capitol building? Regardless of the weather or the season of the year, it is a breathtaking sight. I have visited the Capitol countless times. Every time I begin up the steps, I pause to take in the grandeur of what is certainly one of the state's most architecturally elegant buildings. The Capitol is built in the neoclassical style. It stands an impressive 213 feet tall and features a circular central drum tower capped with a dome and cupola covered with genuine gold leaf. The expansive ground floor is 440 feet long and 190 feet wide. The Capitol is a replica of architect George Mann's then unbuilt design for the Montana Capitol. It is the second building to serve as the seat of state government. The first building, now known as the Old State House, was built in the 1830s between Markham Street and the banks of the Arkansas River in what is now the heart of downtown Little Rock. Beautifully restored, the Old State House now serves as a museum of Arkansas history, hosting many interesting exhibits. The first elected General Assemblies of Arkansas met there every 2 years to introduce, debate, and pass laws for the new state. At times, civil debates over proposed new laws turned bitter and openly hostile. On one such occasion, in 1837, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Wilson, was heatedly debating a tax bill with Representative Joseph J. Anthony when their tempers exploded. Each drew their knives. By the end of the brief but brutal fight, Anthony's bloody body lay dead on the chamber floor. As early as the 1850s, the Old State House was beginning to show its age. Structural problems plagued the aging building. Heavy rains would occasionally cause pieces of the ceiling plaster to fall into the Senate chamber. While the structure's condition deteriorated, public sentiment, poor state finances, and squabbling over a suitable site halted any discussions of a new Capitol building. Finally, in 1899, the state Senate passed Concurrent Resolution 3 of the 32nd General Assembly calling for the construction of a new Capitol. The measure enjoyed the support of Governor Daniel Webster Jones. After a month of deliberation, the House of Representatives adopted the state resolution. Governor Jones signed Act 128 into law in March of that year. The act, known as the Kimbrell State House Act, appropriated $50,000 to hire an architect for initial construction costs. To reduce costs, the act enlisted 200 inmates to work on the construction. The act also created a commission to oversee the construction. Governor Jones had long advocated that the new Capitol be located on the site of the state's first penitentiary at the end of 5th Street, now known as Capitol Avenue. By all accounts, the prison had a history of brutal and harsh conditions. Confederate authorities used the prison as a military jail to hold Union sympathizers and partisans. Later, when Little Rock fell to the Union Army in the Civil War, Confederate soldiers were imprisoned there. Execution of convicted inmates occurred there. The prison death toll was high, and part of the grounds was set aside for a makeshift cemetery where dead inmates with no family to claim them were buried in pauper-like, unmarked graves. This sad fact is significant. Legends holds that the spirits of nameless, forgotten dead, whose bodies are given improper burial, are never at rest. Many hapless inmates and prisoners of war were, upon their deaths in the prison, carted out to the nearby prison cemetery, dumped into unmarked plotted graves, and forgotten. Forgotten, that is, until the state's 32nd General Assembly passed the resolution to build a new capitol. Governor Jones prevailed in his plan to demolish the prison in order to utilize the site for the new construction. The Capitol Commission hired respected St. Louis architect George Mann in May 1899. Mann immediately began designs for the Capitol, which he estimated could be built within the $1 million limit set by the legislature. On July 4, 1899, ground was broken for the new Capitol under the supervision of Capitol Commissioner George Donahue. Initial building plans called for excavation for the massive basement and foundation. This first phase of construction proved to be far more time-consuming and challenging than planned. In fact, this initial phase alone took 17 months to complete. One of the most troublesome obstacles to the basement excavation was the all too frequent unearthing of long-forgotten, rotted wooden coffins. The boxes contained gruesome, decayed contents from the former prison's makeshift cemetery. In building a state capitol, Little Rock, Park Harper Company, 1937, Donahue wrote of unmarked coffins being unearthed and broken to pieces by the digging equipment, spilling the skeletal remains across the construction site. Few other official publications and accounts of the Capitol's construction allude to the unearthing of the prisoners' remains. Many crumbling coffins with unknown corpses were reburied outside the city limits at a site west of what is now University Avenue. However, makeshift coffins and unmarked graves, now disturbed, exhumed, and relocated in the name of progress, did not make for a good foundation for the new capitol. Perhaps it even foreshadowed the bitter controversy that would surround the construction and years later, a bizarre, deadly tragedy and odd occurrences that have lingered for more than a century. 17 months after its groundbreaking ceremony, the excavation of the Capitol's massive basement was finally completed, as was the foundation in October 1900. The cornerstone, which can still be viewed today, was laid on November 27, 1900. Construction of the Capitol quickly became engulfed in political controversy. Governor Jones had been succeeded in office by Jeff Davis, a former state attorney general who was the building project's chief critic. Governor Davis's objections were based on economics. The costs of the Capitol construction were pay-as-you-go appropriations from the legislature. He voiced complaints of everything from the selection of the building site to corruption on the part of the architect and contractors. As costs soared, the citizens of the state grew resentful of the project. Legislators grew increasingly reluctant to appropriate funds for continued construction. In 1905, both Governor Davis and Commissioner Donahue's criticisms of the Capitol construction were bolstered by rumors of bribery leveled at Caldwell and Drake, the chief construction company. The next year, Caldwell and Drake drew heat amid new accusations of shoddy workmanship and subpar materials. By 1907, 8 years after its enthusiastic groundbreaking, work on the Capitol halted completely. The unfinished edifice was predicted to become the habit of owls and bats, according to one often quoted but uncredited source. In the fall of 1908, George Donaghy was elected governor. Donaghy's platform included the promise, "I will finish the Capitol." When he took office in 1909, with the support of the legislature and the Capitol Commission, he swiftly fired architect man and builders Caldwell and Drake. The Capitol Commission then hired New York architect Cass Gilbert to complete the Capitol. Gilbert had an impressive portfolio. He had just completed work on the Minnesota State Capitol and was completing the spectacular Woolworth Building in Manhattan. He also had a solid reputation of bringing massive projects to timely completion. Governor Donaghy took extraordinary measures to ensure work on the Capitol was completed. He had barbed wire fencing installed around the entire perimeter of the massive construction site and stationed armed guards to protect the controversial building's progress from any sort of sabotage. Although the Capitol was still unfinished in 1910, Donaghy and the Capitol Commission deemed it safe for occupation. Workers began unloading wagon loads of furniture and files from the old State House. The General Assembly convened its session there in January 1911. Despite Governor Donaghy's most persuasive efforts, the legislature failed to appropriate adequate funds to completely finish all remaining work on the Capitol. Thus, a mere 30 minutes after the regular session adjourned in May of that year, Donaghy called for a special session, in part to fund completion of the Treasurer's Office and the Supreme Court chamber. The next year, in 1912, Donaghy lost his bid for re-election to Joseph T. Robinson, whose campaign theme was Donaghy's failure to complete the Capitol for the citizens of Arkansas. Governor Robinson, however, resigned to run for the U.S. Senate, and the new governor, George W. Hayes, reappointed Donaghy to the Capitol Commission. With adequate appropriations from the General Assembly, Cass Gilbert was able to complete the building. On January 1, 1915, the state's new Capitol was pronounced completed. The estimated final project cost was more than $2.2 million. Such a controversy, politically charged Capitol building erected on land that once housed a prison with a brutal history, high death toll, and makeshift cemetery, scores high on the probability chart for paranormal activity. And our state capitol, as architecturally grand and breathtaking as it is, does not disappoint. Visitors and state employees alike have reported seeing the ghost of a lady dressed in period clothing floating down the marble staircases. The reported occurrences of her sightings are too frequent to ignore. Cold spots often arise on the marble staircases, sending a chill down the spines of visitors and employees. I have spent countless hours at the Capitol as a state government lawyer over a period of 16 years. If I have downtime during legislative sessions, I visit with various longtime employees of the Capitol, many of whom report paranormal experiences they may have had. Though they work in different offices and on different floors, certain experiences seem to recur. One older lady who has worked for the legislature for many years reports matter-of-factly that the ghost of a man dressed in 19th century period clothing walks the upper 4th floor. She asked me if I had seen the ghost, and when I shook my head no, she looked genuinely shocked, as if his apparition is a common sight. It has also been rumored that the state Capitol police officers assigned to protect the Capitol at night have heard the murmur of disembodied voices in the expansive labyrinth-style basement. I admit, when visiting offices in the basement of the Capitol, I always have had an anxious, uneasy feeling. When the basement corridors are empty, I have had the feeling of being watched by something other than security cameras. Perhaps it is only an overly active imagination, or perhaps the souls of long dead, long forgotten prison inmates who never received proper burial are lingering in the basement where their unmarked graves once lay. One singular component of the Capitol is the overwhelming winner in the haunted category. It came by this reputation in the most ghastly manner. Ira M. Gurley was a member of the House of Representatives elected from Carroll County. Readers may not have heard of Mr. Gurley, but he was the father of Helen Gurley Brown, longtime editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine. On June 17, 1932, Representative Gurley was crushed to death by the Capitol's south elevator. It was a freak accident that no one could explain. Interestingly, one of the current lobby elevators, a more modern version of the cage-style manually operated car that crushed Mr. Gurley, still operates rather oddly today. What makes the elevator so eerily captivating is the commonly accepted perception that it has a mind of its own. I have ridden this elevator countless times through the years, and more often than not, it completely disregards my floor selection and takes me to an entirely different destination. Or, if it is in a more cooperative frame of mind, it will take me to my designated floor, but only after stopping at several others when no one is waiting. I have been on the elevator numerous times with other people, and they will actually say, "Well, I'll push my floor button, but we'll see where we end up." This has become so commonplace that Capitol employees and regular visitors alike get on the elevator, voicing their conviction that the elevator will eventually get them to their desired floor if they just ride long enough. One longtime Capitol employee told me that she has not taken that elevator for years because of its bizarre and independent behavior. She commented that the last time she rode it, the elevator kept her on board alone for an extended period of time. Finally, in a panic, she simply jumped off on a floor where the elevator decided to stop and took the stairs to the floor where she was attempting to go. To this day, she will climb several flights of stairs rather than take that particular elevator. A paranormal investigative group was granted permission to spend one night in the empty Capitol to see if they could discern, record, or witness any spiritual activity. The group's greatest anxiety of their night-long investigation came when they rode this elevator and discovered that it indeed had an independent spirit. No matter which floor button they pushed, the elevator whirred up and down the floors for several minutes, never opening its doors until finally it stopped, yet again, on a floor the crew had not designated. They hastily disembarked anyway and recorded their experiences with the intimidating elevator. Whenever I get on that elevator alone, I quietly but kindly request that it not play around and just take me to the floor I want. Sometimes it even complies with my request. If you have never toured Arkansas's beautiful Capitol, make future plans to do so. Tours are routinely given by knowledgeable docents who can share interesting information about the frequently changing historical exhibits, portraits of past governors, spectacular architecture, and breathtaking rotunda. But be aware, while the Capitol may be bustling with people, employees, children on field trips, tourists, and official visitors, other presences may be roaming its hallways and marble staircases, and one elevator, should you decide to get on, may just take you for the ride of your life.